Welcome to Show-Off Showdown! In this series, the fighters are called Show-Offs, and this is the series for the Show-Off Showdown! Now let's meet the Show-Offs for tonight's Showdown, shall we? Tonight, we have a battle between the River City Girls and the girls of Scott Pilgrim's Dream. That's right, Misako and Kyoko versus Ramona and Kim. Whether if they're fighting to save their boyfriends or defeat them, these girls ain't afraid to kick some tail. I put links to the analysis on both characters in the description below. Now without further ado, it's time for the Show-Off to Showdown!
Get ready for the next battle. Fight!
Looks like Scott Pilgrim just lost another lover!
Now let's discuss how and why the River City Girls win this showdown. First off, let's discuss who is more skilled and experienced. Now while Ramona Flowers is a very skilled and intelligent opponent, but believe it or not, Misako and Kyoko have been trained by Bimmy and Jimmy Lee from Double Dragon, Billy and Jimmy, sorry, who taught them numerous fighting techniques. So while Ramona is arguably a more intellectual opponent than Misako and Kyoko, but they are still much more well trained in formal martial arts. Now as for Kim Pine, while she is capable of performing most of the same physical feats as Ramona, which I'll discuss later, she isn't as much of a fighter as Ramona, and probably not as smart either, so most of the focus will likely be on Ramona. Now let's discuss strength. Now this category is where the River City Girls definitely take the cake. Now don't get me wrong, Ramona and Kim are pretty strong, as they can shatter large blocks with their bare hands. As estimated by Wizard Warrior, if these bricks were about 5 feet in all dimensions, it would take about 193 metric tons of force to break them. Since it usually takes about 7 hits to break them, this means each punch these girls throw is the equivalent of about 27 metric tons of force per hit. Now how do Misako and Kyoko top this? Well, these girls are strong enough to match and eventually overpower Misako, who's strong enough to break through walls, create massive shockwaves just by screaming, and even completely shatter 4 large concrete pillars. I've determined the size of these pillars by comparing them to Misako's height. If I were to give a random but comparable example, this is quite similar to when Yank from Ruby got smashed through a concrete pillar, which was estimated to be the equivalent of 1,400 tons of force. Now as estimated by my good friend the Ragaz, that's the equivalent of over 3 kilograms of TNT. Now in order for Misako to completely shatter these pillars into rubble, the fragmentation upon impact should be roughly about 20 kilograms of TNT, which is almost 7 times greater than Yank's pillar feat. Quite an impressive amount of strength to be sure. Now we could argue that both girls aren't as strong as Misako, and it took the combined effort of both girls to take her down, but even half or a fraction of that strength is still very impressive and way more than what Ramona and Kim can dish out. These girls have also shown this kind of strength consistently, as they can smash cars with little effort, and they've even taken down similarly tough opponents such as a Bobo, yes, a Bobo's in this game, who can create massive shockwaves with an earthquake-like effect that tears up the ground in a pretty wide radius, and causes huge stone slabs to fall from the sky, which he can lift and shatter with little effort. You know what, I think I've said enough. Now let's discuss durability. Not only can Misako and Kyoko take hits from the superhuman behemoths I mentioned earlier, but they can also tank getting run over by a roller coaster car, getting trapped inside a trash compactor with a hydraulic press like crushing force, and when they jumped out the window of a massive skyscraper and crash landed into a stone building, they walked up from it no problem, with no broken bones and hardly even a scratch. Now as for Ramona and Kim, Wizard Warrior has estimated limited their durability to be around building level, as not only can they tank Gideon's meteors, though rather if they're legit or not is debatable, but they also survived an energy beam used during the twins' giant robot boss fight. So these girls are definitely harder to take down than they look. Now let's discuss speed. During the robot boss fight I mentioned earlier, Ramona and Kim can dodge air-to-surface type missiles, which have an average speed of about Mach 1.5, while Misako and Kyoko are capable of keeping up with teleporting opponents with magical abilities, such as when they fought the creepy Hibari chick who looks and feels like an Undertale boss, in which they dodge tons of energy beams and projectiles. Not only that, but when they fought the dark arts master Yamada, they've dodged point-blank energy waves that Yamada fires immediately after teleporting right in front of them, so reacting to that is not as easy as it looks. Not to mention, at one point, the girls were seen avoiding laser grips shooting out of walls, but rather if they're legit or not is debatable. So while there may be a very minor speed difference between the two duos, it's not really significant enough to make much of a difference, especially considering the much greater physical categories discussed earlier. Now that we went over their physicality, let's see if these girls have any hacks or abilities that might influence or make a difference in this battle. For Misako and Kyoko, if one of them gets beaten to the point of death, the other girl can bring her back to life by literally stomping the life back into her. Not to mention, they can also hurt ghosts, as shown in the secret final boss, Hazabe and Mami, where the girls literally beat the life out of one of them, and her ghost flies around the room. In most cases, ghosts are intangible, which may indicate that these girls can harm both physical and astral beings, or ghosts if that's just easier to say. Now as for Ramona and Kim, Kim can summon a giant metaphysical monster with her drums, which can combat music-made dragons. However, she can only do this while playing with her entire band, Sex Bomb, so I don't know why I even brought this up if she can't do it on her own. Now as for Ramona, there's one special ability of hers that I've been wanting to discuss throughout this entire episode, also known as the Glow. The Glow is a form of emotional warfare created by Gideon Graves and given to Ramona. It causes negative emotions and suppresses positive ones. It can be unwillingly transmitted between people under certain conditions, and is normally triggered by an intense emotional situation. Now the real question is, how badly would the Glow affect Misako and Kyoko or their chances of winning? Well, it may depend on how mentally or emotionally stable they are. Now, there are a couple of ways we can look at this. Keep in mind, what I'm about to discuss involves major spoilers from the ending of River City Girls. So, if you have not experienced the full game or don't want the ending of the game to be spoiled for you, then I recommend turning off the video right now. But if you don't really care, then let's resume. To sum it up, these girls went through all hell fighting their way through the whole city to save their supposedly kidnapped boyfriends, only to find out that the boys were at the spa the whole time and the whole rampaging journey was all for nothing. And what's worse, from what I've come to understand, Kunio and Riki were never really their boyfriends to begin with. The boys hardly even knew the girls, and it turns out they were actually dating Hazabe and Mami, who were the two snobby girls that Misako and Kyoko always had some sort of rivalry with. This resulted in the girls punching the boys through the ceiling and sending them far out of sight. Now once again, there are a couple ways we can look at this to figure out how effective the Glow would be. One way we can look at it is that these girls were probably emotionally wrecked after learning the truth and experiencing all of that, as were most of the people who played this game, in which case using this against them might work quite effectively. Or I could be wrong, and this might actually have sort of an opposite effect. From what I've seen throughout the game, these girls have incredibly strong spirits that are really hard to break. No matter who they faced, whoever tells them to give up, or what kinds of insane crap they've been through, some of which might normally traumatize most ordinary teenage girls, these girls never gave up, and their strong hearts were so determined to find and save their boyfriends that they always power through and never let anything stand in their way no matter what. The amount of bravery, stubbornness, determination, commitment, etc. is astonishing in these girls. So much that pretty much nothing has emotionally broken them throughout the game. Not even when they got thrown into a deathly crushing trash compactor full of flesh-eating zombies they had to fight their way through just to find a key, leaving Kyoko's mouth full of zombie brains. If that's not gonna scar a teenage girl for life, then I don't know what will. So basic point, it would take quite a lot to emotionally destroy these girls' spirits or self-esteem, if that's even possible at this rate. Now as for the ending, another way we can look at this is that they actually handled it surprisingly better than it seemed. When they punched out the boys, the way they did it appeared to have a subliminal message that says, screw you, we're done, we don't need you anymore. In fact, the girls looked no more ticked off than they were throughout the entire game, and they were just doing what they knew best. Knowing these girls, it's likely that they'll get over it soon enough. Now, how is any of this relevant, you may ask? Well, like I said before, the glow is likely most effective against those who are emotionally vulnerable or easy to emotionally tear apart. And once again, these girls have minds like a steel trap, so the glow might not be as effective on them as it would on others. For instance, if Ramona tries to use the glow to make the girls see things that would supposedly make them feel depressed or emotionally wrecked to the point of breaking their fighting spirit, the worst she could do is forcibly make them experience that same moment when they got semi-dumped all over again. However, if she does this, it's more likely that this would just take off these girls even further to the point of homicidal rage, which will only increase their chances of brutally beating Ramona to death. No doubt that would backfire on her. So it's more likely that the glow would be more of a temporary hindrance for Misako and Kyoko rather than their ultimate downfall. Not to mention, if the girls take out Kim first, which they most likely will, then it'll be a 2 against 1 situation for Ramona, which is no fun at all, especially when facing these girls. Now, there are a lot of different possible scenarios which could happen in this fight, some of which Ramona might be able to pull the win, especially if she's given prep time, in which case she could use her subspace to overwhelm the girls. Although if the girls get prep time as well, they know to quickly destroy Ramona's bag before she could use it. Now, I forgot to mention Ramona's arsenal, such as her hammer that gives her +2 against girls, though because of the massive strength gap I mentioned earlier, I highly doubt it'll make much of a difference. If anything, it's more likely that Misako or Kyoko could probably steal Ramona's weapons and use them against her, which is something they do almost all the time in their game. Not to mention, the girls too have an arsenal of different items and relics that boost their stats or give them special abilities, such as doing more damage against female opponents just like Ramona. While it is true that most of their items are player's choice, there are some collectible items that are required to progress through the game, such as getting Jacksepticeye a Merv Burger, for example. Now, the 2 most powerful relics in the game, and the preferred choice, are the bunny and tank buttons, which massively increase the girls' speed and strength even further, though it's unlikely they'll need them, considering the huge physical advantage they already have. Now, there's been a lot of debating back and forth on different possible outcomes, discussed in the official SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN Discord server, which I'll put a link to in description, but in the end, we determined that in more than 50% of possible outcomes, the River City girls take the victory more often than not. So overall, while Ramona is a very tough and tenacious opponent, though her partner Kim is debatable, the River City girls were just too strong, too skilled, too stubborn, and too badass for Scott's girls to handle. So in the end, Scott Pilgrim just changed his status to single indefinitely, or maybe just crawl back to knives. The winners of this battle are Misako and Kyoko.
Next time on SHOWOFF SHOWDOwn!
Oh my, you're burning with fever. It's a good thing I know how to lower your temperature. To absolute 0. Airman, get the gate.
Maybe you should go back to school. You never should have left.
Got any ideas for SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN? Then let me know in the comments below, and hopefully, I just might do them. Now stay tuned for the next episode of SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN!